Good evening, everybody. I'm a little bit concerned that the notification for my Facebook Live tonight may not have appeared in my posts earlier on today. So I'm really sorry if you missed the live, but it will be recorded so you can catch up on it later on. And it's lovely to be back tonight. I've had a 2-week break. Well, I haven't been here for 3 weeks because I had a 2-week holiday, which was just what I needed. I feel relaxed and refreshed and ready to be back and sharing my tips and health advice with you again, and weekly now in the lead up to, dare I say, Christmas. And today I decided to talk about tips to help with bone health, because today is World Osteoporosis Day. Spit it out again. World Osteoporosis Day. I've had an article that I've written. I've put that out over my social media channels today with various tips, but this one I've called 10 Top Tips. So there's more information that I'm going to share with you on my live tonight than was in the article that's been shared online. And of course, this video, Facebook Live, along with all my previous ones, this one will be uploaded to my YouTube channel, which is Peyton Principles Good Health. So you can always look back at any other topics that I've done over the course of this whole year. So World Osteoporosis Day. And when I was researching this for my article, what I found was that figures are suggesting that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 5 men, we tend to overlook the men when we think about osteoporosis, but up to 1 in 5 men over the age of 50 will have this condition. So it's a really serious condition and it affects a huge number of people, and it tends to creep up on us. It's a bit like our blood pressure, where we're unaware that we've got a problem, that our bones potentially could be thinning until something goes wrong. And what may happen is you'll hear of people having a fall when they get older and they'll break a bone, and through that it can be discovered that they may have osteoporosis, or they may be diagnosed as having osteopenia, which is the one before it's classified as osteoporosis, which is a sign that bones are thinning. And it's from a DEXA scan that looks at the thickness of certain types of bones in the body. And from that, they determine that the bones are getting thinner, and therefore the risk of fractures is that much higher. And it is far more important than just, and I say the word just because obviously if you have fractures, that's serious, and as you get older and recovery from that is going to take longer, but it is a cause of death as we get older. And I think that's often overlooked, that osteoporosis is a cause of premature death. So everything else in the body and all the organs and the heart and the arteries could be absolutely fine, but it's the osteoporosis that could be the final factor. And how sad is that, when there are things that we can do to keep bones stronger? Now, women are more at risk than men due to the loss of estrogen that helps to keep bones strong after the menopause, once women have gone through the menopause. But equally, the reason why men also have a problem is that testosterone also has a part to play in men's health and keeping men's bones strong. And as that declines also as men get older, then that can become a problem. But what may not be known is that prior to menopause in women, and as men are getting older, that bones actually start to lose their density from about the age of 35. So it's happening much sooner, or potentially can start happening much sooner than you may think. It's a living organ, so it's constantly being what we call remodeled. Old bone is broken down, new bone is formed. There are specialist cells osteoblasts and osteoclasts that are involved in this bone remodeling, the breaking down of old bone and the formation of new bones. So it's very much important that we do everything we can to keep bones strong. Now, the first thing I do want to say is that the focus is always about calcium. Everybody thinks that we absolutely have to focus on calcium, and yes, we do. We do need to think about calcium, but often and usually what I find is that calcium is considered at the expense of everything else that we need to take into consideration. And the reason why calcium is so important is that bones are predominantly made up of the mineral calcium, so we know it is important. However, there is too much of an emphasis on calcium at the expense of everything else. And I think over the years, grew up with the Milk Marketing Board and this strong push for calcium, and still today, so for dairy, and there's still a strong push today that we need to have dairy in order to have strong bones. And I am going to disagree with that fact. I can point to a study, 12-year study that was done in the early 2000s of 78,000 women, which found that those who drank milk 3 times a day actually broke more bones than women who rarely drank milk. And that was a US Department of Health and Human Services study on bone health and osteoporosis that was published in 2004. I find my data using something called PubMed, so it's out there and available to look at. So it's not just something I've made up. But people are very attached, if you like, to the thought that we need to consume dairy. And what I often say to my clients is that in the Far East, where dairy is not really consumed, they don't have the problem with osteoporosis. So why is it in a country where we tend to consume a lot of dairy that the risk of osteoporosis is that much greater? Of course, there are a lot of factors, and let me go through some of those with you. Of course, first of all, it's about the fact that we need to be able to digest our food. So we need to be able to extract minerals and other cofactors, and I'll talk about what I mean by cofactors in a moment, but we need to have other cofactors. We need to be able to extract the calcium and other minerals and other cofactors from our food. We need to be able to digest it. We need to be able to absorb it. We need to be able to get the calcium and other cofactors and other minerals from the gut. We need to get it into the bloodstream. We need to get it from the bloodstream up into the bone. And so it takes several steps involved in this. So you can be consuming the best quality diet, and you may think, oh no, dairy doesn't form part of my diet, or I'm vegan and I don't consume dairy, so I don't need to worry about it. But you do need to be concerned about it, and you do need to be aware of the factors that are going to help, which is what I'm going to go through now. So my top 10 tips for you, over and above the consumption of calcium that we can get in many foods other than dairy. So there's a lot of information you can find on the internet about calcium rich sources that doesn't involve dairy, and vegans are not going to suddenly have osteoporosis because they're not consuming dairy. So my first tip in thinking about bone health is to think about vitamin D. We need vitamin D and adequate vitamin D status to enable calcium to cross from the gut into the bloodstream. So vitamin D is important from that point of view. Of course, we can get vitamin D in certain fat-soluble foods. So again, dairy, yes. But we get vitamin D in eggs. It's a fat-soluble vitamin. Predominantly, we're going to get vitamin D from the sunshine. And of course, we're now at the time of year where we are not going to get vitamin D from the sunshine. Hence the reason why it is essential that we supplement vitamin D through the winter months. And as a minimum, it's 400 IU. I think at the moment it's absolutely critical that we think about increasing that to 1000 IU because of its really important factor in immune status as well. But vitamin D, it's very important. These days, if you go to the GP and if there is a risk about bone health, they will recommend calcium with vitamin D. But there was a time when it was just calcium on its own that was supplemented and recommended. And unfortunately, if we take calcium in isolation without all the other cofactors and not just vitamin D, then calcium can be deposited in other parts of the body. So it can be deposited in the arteries, it can be deposited in joints and can contribute to joint problems, in the kidneys, and it can be deposited in the gallbladder. And so people who have gallbladder problems and gallstones can be made up of excess calcium. So hence another reason why we need to think about all the other important cofactors. So vitamin D, think about your vitamin D status. Think about supplementing vitamin D3, critically important through all these winter months from October to March as an absolute minimum. The second thing is, do you think your diet is rich in magnesium? We are going to get magnesium from our dark green leafy vegetables. We get magnesium from our whole grains, from brown rice, from nuts and seeds. Do you think you've got adequate magnesium intake in your diet? Lots and lots of dark green leafy vegetables that you need to have, and they are also a very good source of calcium. So you're going to get your calcium and your magnesium when you eat things like dark green leafy vegetables. Why is magnesium important? Well, we've spoken about vitamin D, helping calcium get from the gut into the bloodstream. And I mentioned earlier that we need to get calcium from the bloodstream and up into the bone. And that's where magnesium is really important. It helps move calcium from the bloodstream and into bone. So it's very, very important that we have sufficient magnesium status. And if I know people have a problem with their bone density, and I know they may be supplementing calcium and vitamin D that they may be getting from the doctor, I would be adding in magnesium alongside that as well. So that's very important. Another mineral that's really important is zinc. It's a trace mineral. Trace means we only need it in very, very small quantities, say in comparison to the amount of calcium that we need to have each day. But it is found in bone, and so therefore it is important. And often people are deficient in zinc. It's found predominantly in seafood and in meats. It's found in small quantities in things like pumpkin seeds. And I think it's often deficient in our Western diets. So think about your zinc status. Number 4. So I've just spoken about 2 very important minerals alongside the calcium. So there's 3 important minerals there. And I mentioned how vitamin D is important for helping the absorption of calcium. But there are a number of compounds that we will find in our diets that inhibit mineral absorption. This is inhibiting it from moving from the gut and into the bloodstream. Mineral inhibitors. I'm going to go through these. They're very, very important. The first one are phytates, and we find phytates in pulses, we find them in non-fermented soya, and we find them in wheat. And if we have a diet that's very high in phytates, what these mineral inhibitors do is they can bind, the phytate will bind to some of these minerals that are in the gut, and so therefore there is less available to be absorbed into the bloodstream. So it's really, really important. And what will happen is this binding of the minerals to something like phytate, it will excrete that out of the body. So there's less available. So have a look at your diet and think about whether you have a diet that's high in pulses, high in non-fermented soya, like you would find in soya milk and soya yogurts. And is it high in wheat? So think about, you may be having the best calcium-rich diet and magnesium-rich diet, but are you eating foods that are going to potentially inhibit the amount of these minerals that is available for absorption into the bloodstream. The second mineral inhibitor is oxalates. You probably don't have as much of these, or maybe you do, because the oxalates are found in spinach and rhubarb. And I often find people say to me, oh, I love spinach. I eat lots and lots of spinach. Or they may say, oh, I like raw spinach. You know, they buy salad bags and there's lots of raw spinach leaves in there. Well, that is going to create a potential problem. Again, oxalates, oxalic acid binds to these minerals. The third one to think about is phosphates, and we get phosphates, phosphatic acid, in fizzy drinks. So it doesn't matter whether they're your sugary ones or your low sugar ones, but do be very, very careful. Fizzy drinks have no place in a diet. They add nothing to a diet apart from the fact that you may like them. Keep them for a special treat if it's something that you really like. Phosphates are going to bind to the minerals. And the next one is tannins in tea. I advise my clients to drink their tea and coffee well away from mealtime for this very reason. Tannins, tannic acid, what leaves that mark in a cup. The tannins will bind to the minerals and again encourage the excretion out of the body, and the same with alcohol as well. So there's lots of things to think about there when we're trying to ensure that we're getting the maximum amount of minerals from our diet that is available to move into the bloodstream and into the bones as well. The fifth one, thinking about these phytates and you know, can we reduce the impact of phytates and their ability to do this binding? Yes, we can. It's been shown that if we soak nuts and seeds and oats, things like that, because nuts and seeds also have some phytic acid, and then rinse them, then you're going to reduce the amount of phytates in those foods. And that's why it's really important, of course, with pulses, that of course they are soaked and then they're cooked for a really long time, but they do have quite a high content of phytates. And the sixth thing with regard to minerals, maximizing mineral absorption, is when you're cooking them, don't boil them. Don't sort of boil them in water. I always steam my vegetables because you've got less chance of minerals leaching into that boiling water. You want to hold on to the mineral content in those vegetables. So I always, and have done for 25 years, I have always steamed vegetables. You can roast them, there's other ways, but don't boil your vegetables. You're going to lose your some of the mineral content from them. Now the next point is a really important one, and it has a big impact on many people, and it's to do with stomach acid suppressants, your proton pump inhibitors, things like omeprazole. The lowering of stomach acid is critically important for turning minerals into a form that makes them very absorbable. So when we have less stomach acid available, it may result in the minerals not being in their best form to be absorbed. It's a really, really important point. I stress it, and if you are on proton pump inhibitors, go and look at the medication leaflet that comes with them, because you'll probably find that it will say something about bone health in there. And it's because of this point that low stomach acid will have an impact on the ability for the body to absorb minerals adequately. So if you're looking at that, it's something you may want to talk to your GP about. Obviously, I help people with gut health and digestive health problems. And very often I find it's not, the reason why they're on stomach acid medication is because it's assumed they're on high stomach acid, and usually I find it's low anyway. But do discuss it with your GP. That's the place to go to if they've prescribed the medication, or go and have a look at your leaflet. They shouldn't be taken long term, but very often people are on these drugs for a very long period of time, and they're often on those drugs at a later stage in life. and the two don't really go hand in hand. So do have a think about that. And as I said, go and talk to your GP if you're concerned about that. My 8th point here in my top 10 tips is, do you have adequate protein intake? Protein and the amino acids are a very important component of collagen, and its collagen is part of the bone matrix, keeping bones strong. So very important. But equally, again, when it comes to the mineral absorption, amino acids from protein act as a carrier to the minerals and helping to carry the minerals across into the bloodstream. So are you eating protein adequately? Do you have protein with every meal of your day? And is your protein source not just coming from pulses? Because as I said earlier, that may have a detrimental impact. And yes, I do understand it does get complicated, but these are the tips for you to think about. My 9th tip is to think about your fatty acid intake, your essential fats, your omega-3 fats. Do you have a good intake coming from oily fish? Do you have an intake coming from walnuts and flax seeds, although you're not going to get so much of a good intake coming from those? But oily fish is very important for helping to keep bones strong. And then you need to look at your omega-6 and omega-3 ratio, and your omega-6 is coming more from your vegetable oils, maybe if it's a very high nuts and seeds intake, and the ratio between the omega-3 and the omega-6 could be out of sync. And many people in the Western world have an omega-6 to 3 ratio of 20 to 1, when ideally we want it more of a 1 to 1 ratio. And also, if omega-3 status is low, it's more you're in more of a inflammatory state in the body. So your omega-3 fatty acids, the ones that are found in the oily fish, are crucially important to this as well. Not at the top of the chain, but they are very, very important, and they can only be obtained from the diet. And my final point to finish off, I can't often finish many of my talks without bringing in the role of gut bacteria and the microbiome. And yes, it is important here as well, because lactic acid bacteria, the beneficial bacteria, some of them lactic acid bacteria, help to metabolize and neutralize some of the phytic acid. Earlier on, I mentioned phytates that are found in some of our foods that can be a mineral inhibitor. But if we've got good levels of lactic acid bacteria, they're really important. They can help to metabolize some of that phytic acid. So they have a very beneficial role to play. So probiotics or increasing some of your fermented foods in your diet is another aspect to thinking about bone health. So that's my talk today on World Osteoporosis Day. But whether it's World Osteoporosis Day or not, it's really important information to be thinking about your bone health, whether you're a man or a woman. So I hope that's been really useful information. And I look forward to catching up with you next week. As I said, do look out for all my posts and my videos on YouTube, Peyton Principles Natural Health. Please go over and have a look, and please go and subscribe to my channel over there. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you next week.